Lava, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the call. I rise to again offer the Green Party's support for the Sue Moroney's Members' Bill to extend paid parental leave to 26 weeks. And I would like to acknowledge that we believe that this is a perfectly reasonable and affordable initiative alongside the changes that this government has signalled in terms of extending the entitlement as well as the amounts that are coming from this. I would like to firstly address some of the comments that were made from the previous speaker, Chris Okenval, and his comment that this bill is before its time, unfortunately. And I would like to ask him what he thinks the suffragists would have said to that. That when they were fighting for the equality of women and for this Parliament to recognise the role of women in society, now well over 100 years later, would they be saying that a measly 6 months is before its time? I don't think they would. New Zealand has the second lowest provision of paid parental leave in the OECD. Denmark, Italy and the UK can afford between 9 and 15 months. And those powerhouse economies of Estonia, Finland and the Czech Republic can somehow afford up to 3 years. And yet this country, the country that led the world in providing the vote for women, is saying that we can't afford 26 weeks for our family. That's just blatantly ridiculous. And particularly in the same day that we've heard in this House that the government is throwing away hundreds of millions of dollars to polluters without even reporting to the public on who's getting that money. The fact that we would suggest that women's employment conditions are unaffordable is ridiculous. Against every growth opportunity is what we're hearing. Well, I would say that supporting our children is probably one of the greatest growth opportunities that this country has in terms of investing in our family and women and employment conditions. And I would like to remind this House that there were 3,809 submissions made on this bill, and 3,795 of those, a resounding 99.6%, supported 26 weeks. And the benefits that they identified for their reasons for supporting it were that 26 weeks facilitates bonding and attachment between parent and the baby. It improves health outcomes for mothers, babies and children. It reaches the World Health Organization's guidelines of exclusive breastfeeding for up to 6 months. It supports families and ensures the stability of family incomes. It allows choice for women and maintains workplace attachment. It updates our employment conditions to recognise women's participation. It improves employment retention and assists employers to manage leave and workflows. They are some of the benefits that were listed in the submissions that we heard on this bill. And for the government to say that those benefits are unaffordable to us as a society shows a very, very narrow view of investment and value. It would have also offered us a chance to improve our really poor ranking in the OECD. And the only country at the moment who's worse than us is the US. This will take us up, the government's previous bill will take us up, admittedly, a little bit further on that scale, but not to a level that gives honour and credit to our foremothers. It would also have given a chance to deliver on something towards our international human rights obligations and documents that we've signed that have obliged us to review and, when possible, extend paid parental leave. And it would have created more job opportunities, as employers told us quite clearly that in the
smaller length of time, they're just covering the work and they're not, whereas if it was 6 months, they would actually employ somebody to fill in that time and that space. So this would have created opportunities, and the government's provisions probably won't, tragically. And I do want to just itemise that the costs of the 26 weeks were worked out to be $138 million a year by 2016-17 when it was fully implemented. And that would have been offset by potential short-term savings, which isn't even taken into account the long-term savings and benefits to society. But the short-term savings would have been $28 million per annum. So it would have only been $110 million a year. And remember, the government is currently throwing away hundreds of millions of dollars to polluters without even looking twice. So 110 million. And some of those, that 28 million savings that would have happened would have been from a reduction in early childhood education subsidies, an additional $8 million in tax from recipients of paid parental leave, additional $5 million in tax from temporary employees filling in for those on paid parental leave, and benefit payments being reduced by $2.4 million per annum as a result of beneficiaries replacing paid parental leave participants. For a government that's saying, that it's absolutely committed to getting people into paid work and off benefits, this is a lost opportunity. And that is a shame. And I really do want to say also and challenge the government a little bit more specifically around they're saying that it's unaffordable, because they've gone beyond this bill and come up with their own options, but they've done it in a very, very limited sense and haven't looked at all the options. In front of the committee, there was a presentation to us around looking at paid parental leave as a basic employment right, and recognising that, basically, annual leave, sick leave, bereavement leave are currently all funded at 100% in this country. And even ACC is funded at 80%. Yet paid parental leave is only really funded at about 26% of the allowed time for 1 year. And then that payment is only up to about 48% of the average wage. So we have a very gendered outline of employment conditions. Our employment laws and employment protections are based on the old school idea that there was one earner and somebody at home looking after the children. Paid parental leave offers us the opportunity to update our laws to recognise that actually we have parents and women in the workplace. Just like annual leave protects and recognises that people deserve holidays. It's kind of basically the same thing. And that ACC and paid parental leave also have a lot in common, which I think is worth noting, that they're both contributed to universally, but only used by a small percentage of people for limited periods of time. And ACC has, it's worth noting, a marked gender bias in payouts, with $641 million per annum being paid more to men than to women through ACC. And, so that actually we could have looked at an employer contribution for paid parental leave that wouldn't have cost the government's fiscal kind of outlook a thing. So when the government was supposedly looking outside of the square to provide the best option, they didn't even look at the option that would have cost their books nothing. So I really think to use a financial veto when they've had such a failure of imagination, or actually even listening to the submitters, is disingenuous. And it does seem to me to be letting down New Zealanders. But finally, I just want to finish on a lived story from one of the submitters, because at the heart of it, this is about people and about families. And so, of a woman with twins who had to go back to work when her twins were 5 months old and had to leave work every 2.5 hours to breastfeed, all while her babies were both still waking at different times every night to breastfeed. Unsurprisingly, this wasn't sustainable. She couldn't cope. She quit the job to look after her babies. Her family lost that income. She lost that attachment to her job, and her family is worse off for it. This bill gives a chance to redress that.
Sorry.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I apologise.
Honourable Trevor Mallett.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to, in a slightly convoluted way, seek the leave of the House for the Maori Party vote to be recorded on this bill as three bills. Mr. Flavel, sorry, three votes. Mr. Flavel has, who was to be here, has been called away in the last 2 hours.